Okay, hey everybody, it's SaaStr. I'm with one of my favorite entrepreneurs and CEOs, Godard Abel. He has been doing SaaS probably for longer than we both care to admit, right? When I got into the industry in 2005, he was already a leading founder with a company called Big Machines. You probably haven't heard of it, but it was so early in the world of SaaS and cloud. And then they sold for like 400 million. I think it blew my mind back in the day that anyone could sell the company for 400 million, right? Before we had any unicorns. And then he went on from that and did a bunch of things, founded multiple, I think like 3 companies after that, right? Is that right? I think we had 3 after that.
Yes, depending on how you count them, but
Yes.
some obviously not 2 as CEO and a couple more where I'm exec chairman.
And then G2 was interesting. We're going to talk about G2 today because everyone either has used G2, is a G2 customer, looks at the research, has at least written a review. I'd be shocked if anyone that doesn't watch or read this hasn't participated in G2. But I want to go a little bit deeper and learn some things. But just for fun, I remember when I was still running EchoSign, now Adobe Sign, G2 was there in the beginning. So you had this vision. It's got to probably been over a decade, right? So what was the original vision and how is it, I mean, a decade's a long time. How has it evolved differently than you thought?
Yeah, well, we did start all the way back in 2012. So it has been over a decade. And honestly, it was a long, slow slog at the beginning. Frankly, so slow that I went to found Steelbrick and built that and sold to the Salesforce before coming back. And during that time, my co-founder, Tim Handorf, who was our head of product originally, he did a great job actually scaling the platform, getting it to critical mass. But what did take a long time was to actually get people to write reviews. And I remember at the beginning, we thought, oh, great idea. We're going to build a Yelp for business software.
Yeah.
And, I think we were all, I'm sure you were, we were all frustrated by the status quo of our industry, which was Gartner. And particularly when we were building Big Machines, I just remember we did start all the way back in 2000. So I've been building SaaS companies now 23 years, but I remember it took us 9 years to get in a Gartner report.
Yeah.
And actually, I remember, I think 4 years in, there was a Gartner analyst wrote a report that said like CPQ is dead, Oracle and SAP own it. It's over. I'm never writing another report. So that wasn't helpful. And then, but they eventually they came back with a sales configuration market scope. And I think we were finally mentioned in 09, 2012 became a leader. So it took 12 years. And frankly, like that also wasn't the favorite part of my job, briefing analyst, frankly, was the least favorite part. And so we just thought, and we were spending about 100,000 a year with them. And we just thought, wow, this kind of broken capitalism, where you're paying a lot of money to somebody, you're paying them to speak at your conference. You don't necessarily think they're that interesting.
Yeah.
You don't really necessarily value their strategic advice, but you have to pretend, you have to play the game. And we played the game because it was important and eventually it worked, but we just thought there had to be a better way. And also for software buyers, and I think also 2012, that's actually when Mark Andreessen said software is eating the world.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what that means, but keep going.
Yeah. Well, and then I like to say the world needs a buffet of software.
Yeah.
And, G2 was that buffet. And then just like for food at restaurants, right, we thought user reviews were missing. And that was my other story about the traditional analyst. It's like, it's like asking, they're like restaurant critics that can't eat the food. They're standing outside the restaurant saying, hey, Jason, how was your meal? They interview customers, but they can't actually eat the food. So we're like, hey, why not just ask the diners, the users of software?
Yeah.
And we just thought our industry needed it. But it was also hard business to start because I remember I went early on, pitched some like early stage VCs, angels. They are actually all very skeptical. They're like, oh, this isn't just another SaaS thing. How are you going to make
Gartner
money?
was huge back then. Gartner's always been huge, right?
True. And they've done very well. They're a very well-run company, and I think that's also good. I think they're the big incumbent and, they've, I don't know, like a $20-30 billion market cap. They keep growing, very well-run company, but we still think their insight model is more of a legacy model. And we just thought, we want to give software buyers a site where they can discover the right apps. And that's also become, I think, a huge challenge now. And partly thanks to SaaStr, there's so many more SaaS apps now. There's over 100,000 on G2.
There's 100,000 on G2?
Over 100,000 listings.
So that we can consider a dispositive number because those are all real apps. There's 100,000 paying revenue generating SaaS apps at a bare minimum, right?
Yeah, they're not necessarily all paying. I mean, most of those listings are free.
No, but they are revenue. They probably wouldn't be revenue generated and they wouldn't be on G2, right? Folks that probably have a million or more ARR.
We validate their real apps with real features. And so, there's over 100,000 real SaaS apps out there today, which is obviously just phenomenal. And I think it does also create a challenge, though, for the software buyer, because odds are there is a purpose-built app for you, Jason, for your industry, for your business function, for your business problem. But how do you discover it? And then secondly, how do you trust it? And those are really the problems, we set out to solve at G2 when we started.
Have you, out of curiosity, have you done interesting. I think the answer is yes, but that second tier of apps, right? When we go back, I'm not, going the classic Gartner Magic Quadrant, all you do is look to the upper right. And that happens at G2 as well, but I'll see 100 apps or 200 apps in a category. Do you boost that second category? Because that's always this weird, elusive area with the big analysts, right? Is how do I take advantage of it if I'm not yet that number one, if I'm not the G2 or the HubSpot or the Salesforce?
Yeah, and actually right now I'm looking at e-signature just for fun, Jason, to go back to your old world. And we have 332 listings in e-signature software. And of course,
does it help number 8? Does G2 help? I mean, I know you're selling this, but but I think that discovery of 332 always wants to get into market, but I find that the 8 to 20 is the toughest part and sometimes to be, isn't it?
True. Yeah. And I think what we do, we want to help the seller, but of course we want to help the buyer. So I think one unique thing, and the problem like Gartner Forrester, they publish like one wave, one quadrant, and it's one document. Whereas G2, it's all digital. So of course you can start to filter like, hey, I'm an SMB, I'm a mid-market company, I'm an enterprise. So you can filter by company size, by industry.
Yeah.
And so then that obviously helps the buyer because, some of those 10 to 30, they might be the best, I don't know, at hospital signatures, or I'm making this up.
Vertical.
They might be the best for a vertical. They might be the best for SMBs. They might be the best for enterprise. So the whole idea by having a data-driven platform, versus an analyst is that the buyer can dial it in. And I do think in terms of also what's new at G2 and obviously in the world, generative AI. And we have launched a G2 AI Monty this year. It's powered by ChatGPT. And I actually think that's going to be one of the best ways to, discover the long tail apps for software buyers, because more you can just put in your requirements. And frankly, and today, probably people know what e-signature is, right? But maybe 10 or 20 years ago, people didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
There's like saying, hey, how do I close my deals more efficiently? And, then with Monty can ask more questions. You have to sign up for Monty, so we know your company, your industry. But then with Monty, we can actually guide you based on a business problem you're solving to the best app. And you may not know what category, because that's the other challenge on G2. There's over 2,000 categories now on G2 as well. And the reality is most software buyers don't necessarily know what category to look in. They just know I have a business problem. And they know their context, their industry, their company environment, but they don't know what app or even what category of apps helps them. And that's where we are excited about Monty, can actually, based on a conversation about their business problems, can actually guide them to the best apps. And I think it can also lead to more long tail discovery, because if that business buyer has some problem you uniquely solve for some vertical, let's say, Monty will recommend it. And so we're really excited that I think that will make long tail discovery a lot easier.
It's interesting. And do you need, if there's 100,000 apps plus in general and 2,000 some categories, and the average buyer maybe buys 200, right? I get why you'd absolutely want an agent, right? Something like Monty. Why do you need ChatGPT? Why couldn't it have been architected with some other database or language model? Because you don't need to pull in everything from the internet. You have enough data on G2. I only need the G2 data to get good answers, don't I?
Well, kind of.
I mean,
I think, and we have tried for over 10 years to build like guided buying experiences, if you will, like filtering based on industry and company size, et cetera. But honestly, none of them ever worked great. And especially, I think a lot of the insight in G2 reviews also, we ask a bunch of structured data questions. Like one category will ask, like e-signature will actually ask like 25 different questions, mainly structured data plus unstructured data, like what do you like, what do you dislike, what business problem you're solving. And I think especially where the AI is good is the unstructured data. So you can just use words like, we can match, hey, this business problem that someone's looking to solve, that matches really well to these apps, for example, regardless of category. And I do think for all software, it's just a better interface, than like forms-based querying and searching, which is almost all enterprise software today. And frankly, traditional search, including the search on G2.com, like if you go to our search box, honestly, it kind of sucks. Because that's all the problems.
It's a big problem.
Yeah.
Search is a big problem. Yeah.
It is. And frankly, also on G2, when I want to search G2, I go back to Google, and we have great SEO, but our insight search is bad. I think it is on most websites and most apps, so I do just think conversational AI, a much better interface to discover apps on G2, but really to discover anything, and the nice thing is you're not forced into like a forms-based structure. It can have a Q&A that feels just much more like, frankly, you're talking to an Accenture consultant. But I think the advantage Monty has over an Accenture consultant might be like, hey, I'm really deep in CRM for telcos, and they spent their career there, and you could probably ask them any question about CRM for telco, and they would crush the answer. But but the advantage Monty has and AI has, right? He can learn on everything, and I actually think that generalized knowledge from the internet helps as well, and that's why I build on top of ChatGPT, just because like for the human nature of the dialogue, and then we train Monty, we inject our data, we also train it on software Q&A conversations. We're still training it; it's still in alpha. And I'd love for you all to try it. It's available on g2.com. And obviously we take your feedback. So we're still dialing it in, but it's honestly like, I think super promising. And I do think it will be a much better way to guide software buyers to the best apps for them to consider.
Yeah, it is interesting because, G2 does a lot of interesting things, but in my personal experience, about 80% of the advice I get is either bad, in quotes for apps, it's biased, or it's just to buy the number one. Right. Which is fair. Right. I mean, it's to do the brand. So
number one, usually is safe. Right. So
safe. Right. It's safe on many levels. I think these days it's not just safe because you don't get fired. That's the old view. It's safe because if it's 10 years old, it's probably going to work.
True.
It's like there's different levels of safe, I think.
Right. And there's privacy, there's security.
There's enterpriseification, there's vendor transition or acquisition or change. Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of risk. Right.
So I do think, and I think in some ways, and it reminds me of like investment banker pitches, where like everyone is number one at something.
Yeah.
And I've never done an IPO. Hopefully someday I will. But apparently when they come pitch you, they're like, hey, Jason, like everyone's number one. And they're like, well, we're number one in like Bay Area IPOs and SaaS.
Yeah.
This spring. And maybe that's like, kind of BS. But I think in software it can actually be real because you can be like, hey, I may not be number one. Like I may not be DocuSign, but for SMBs in France, in retail, I am number one.
Yeah.
And then if that matches who you are as a customer, if you fit that slice, that segment of the market, then that's actually very valuable, right? And
very valuable. It's very, very valuable, right?
And that I think is the biggest advantage of G2, it's just a big database. Now we have all our data in Snowflake. And we're actually also selling data solutions now. Like we have over 50 investors as customers, a lot of leading VCs, private equity firms, even now McKinsey, Bain, BCG.
For growth stage, for the later stage folks looking for signals?
Even early, and I think they all wish to remain confidential, but almost every top tier VC now has a data strategy.
Yeah.
We're not the only data source, but I think they all say, hey, for private software companies to get product level data, we're probably the best. And obviously they match that up with like employee data from LinkedIn and Glassdoor data and all these other data sets, but it does allow them. And right now it's not so hot, but obviously 2 years ago, every VC, they all had to become BDRs, right? They all had to do outreach because the hot deals wouldn't come to them. They had to go find them based on data. So
true today in some ways, but yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting, you've been doing SaaS for a long time. That's not a distraction to your core. I get why you have the data and why people will pay you $100,000 or $50,000 for it. I don't know what the price is, but I'm sure you can get $20,000 to $100,000. I'm putting in quotes relatively easily.
It is right? Honestly, it's like 50 to 100K investor already.
Yeah.
And you could say it's a distraction, but the beauty of it is really not, right? Because we have just put all our data in the Snowflake data lake. And especially the sophisticated investors, especially hedge fund types, are like, hey, just give me APIs.
Yeah.
And we are adding now a user interface, but we actually see it synergistic because we also sell it now as market intelligence to software vendors. And for example, I was talking to our mutual friend, Nick from Gainsight.
Yeah.
And, now they're owned by Vista Equity, but they're always looking for adjacencies. They've gone in.
They would be a good customer. Yeah.
Also looking at like, hey, what's the data? What are the adjacent markets to customer success, product experience management? How are they trending? How are those categories trending? How are the vendors trending? So it can also be very strategic, certainly for M&A, competitive strategy. And honestly, for G2, it's also more strategic product to sell because, our core solution is more demand gen driven, which was 2 years ago amazing. Honestly, in the last year, it's been challenging. We've seen a lot more burn, right? Because marketers are all cutting back. Like one of our board members, Megan Eisenberg, whom you probably know, longtime CMO. She was actually VP of marketing at DocuSign way back in the day.
I remember. Yeah, we know her well.
Trip actions, lace work now. But anyway, she said she thinks her average peer is cutting back now. Growth stage CMO, they're cutting back spend 50%. So it's a tough environment if you're selling marketing solutions, which we do. So our growth has slowed, but I think that's what I also like about market intelligence. It's more strategic buy, right? And if it becomes part of your annual product strategy and, you know, your competitive strategy, all of a sudden it's also a stickier product. But a long way of saying, we think that that data product, and by the way, that's also what we use to train Monty. You know, you need all this data in a data lake anyway. Yeah. And Monty can even be used now by investors and consultants where you can just query the data.
That's powerful.
Investors actually love working that way. You know, they also don't want to do reports and graphs. You know, they just want to say, like, back in the day, like when Emergence was investing in you, they're like, hey, how does EchoSign compare to DocuSign? Or are they winning? Are they losing? Why? Why do customers switch? Why don't they? And the beauty of a conversational AI interface, it can pull out all those answers in a conversation.
And do you need I don't want to talk about marketers before we run out of time, but do you need, just out of curiosity, do you need a second sales team to sell this data product to investment banks and others, or can the same folks sell it?
Yes. No, you can't. It's a different language, you know?
Yeah. So that you're competing with PitchBooks and CB Insights, and maybe you're additive in some way. It's not a direct comp, but you need folks that know that language in that industry, right?
We have found we need a different sales team. And honestly, even now selling market intelligence to software marketers, we actually have, now we've taken an overlay person that used to sell data solutions, because we also find like it's just a different sale, you know, because now like at Salesforce, you might know like John Tashik, you know, he's like their SVP market intelligence and insights, but that's just very different than selling to a demand gen marketer.
Yeah, radically different, right? So you might almost need two and a half sales teams and an overlay, right?
Which is, you know, maybe not as good, but frankly, it also strengthens our pitch. And part of my pitch, like an entrepreneur at SaaStr, would be like, hey, by the way, you know, our reviews don't just influence customers, which is obviously most important, but by the way, they also influence all these investors and consultants. And I think what I've also heard anecdotally, which is kind of fun, you know, people always check out Glassdoor reviews now, I think, you know, before they join a company to see about the culture. But I think also most people looking at companies now, they're also like, oh, let's look at the G2 reviews, right? Because you want to know,
for sure,
happy, are the customers happy? So, and that's kind of also our pitch. It's like, hey, it's an overall brand platform, because ultimately the quality, the satisfaction of your products, that's going to be important to everyone, right? Customers, investors, partners, employees. So, you know, so it's all, which is kind of cool 10 years in. I think that was kind of the vision, but it's starting to happen more and more where it's just influencing, you know, people in the software industry.
Yeah, I certainly personally use G2 a lot to get a sense of the quality of a vendor, right? As an employee might, for a variety of reasons, just to get it is like a Glassdoor, right? We already know the top names out there of the 100,000, but I just want to quickly know, especially in crowded categories, I'll invest my time for a myriad of reasons if it's a breakout in some way, right? I just want to know, is it breakout, or is it one of these ones where people bang their heads on the table because they have no ability to compete in the market? And yeah, G2 is powerful at. But the market, the demand gen thing, tell me what you're seeing. I think everyone's interested. I'm seeing a hint of a cautious recovery in marketing spend, a hint of it. I'm seeing a hint of fatigue of cuts for a year, a hint of, well, now we have no pipeline for Q1 of next year. We have a plan for next year, right? It's not what it was, but we got to grow. So I'm seeing lapping tough times leading to a hint of cautious recovery, but that's across maybe 200 sponsors and partners. What are you seeing across a much wider swath? Am I being delusional or too optimistic in this cautious recovery?
I'm probably also cautiously optimistic that, you know, we're at the bottom of the parabola.
Yes.
You know, and we're probably in our, you know, we're in the Salesforce fiscal year, so we're just starting our Q3, but I'm kind of hoping in terms of all overall industry growth, sentiment, demand gen spend, that Q2, Q3 is sort of the bottom, right? And then we'll start to come out of it. But, you know, and I think that's so far what our data is saying, you know, but I think we need more time. And I think we also, none of us know how long the bottom of this parabola is going to be.
Yeah.
But it does feel like, yeah, the big cuts I think have been made. And now, like you said, people also at some point, and especially all the VC-backed companies, right? At some point, I also got this at my board meeting. They're like, hey, Godard, it's great, you're getting more efficient, but, you know, what about the 50% per annum growth? I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you got to spend it, you got to deploy it as a marketer, right? Maybe less, but that's what I think I'm seeing. But oddly still tied to needing to show very short-term ROI, right? For us, the thing that's changed so much in the last 12 to 18 months. It's just interesting because I get to see a different slice of marketers than you do, right? As I would say in 2021, you know what no one wanted from SaaStr was a lead scan. It's a scan, Godard. We've been doing this for a long time. What I want is a qualified buyer. I want 10 qualified buyers, not 1,000 scans. And then something changed about 6 months ago is every CMO or marketer is being judged this quarter. So pipeline, like hooray, pipeline. But what did you get this quarter? So it's very interesting to see scans as a proxy really become the most important I've seen in 10 years. Because you could show it. You can go back home and you can say the next day I got it. Even if you and I know it's too high up on the pipeline, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there is that, and I think also our sales cycles have lengthened, right? Conversion has lengthened. That's happened for most people. I mean, now under marketers also under pressure. Hey, give me some stuff that's going to convert now.
Yeah.
And we're actually seeing it also at G2. I mean, one of the things we're changing, you know, we have a free profile. We're very committed to free. Because like I said, we never wanted to be like the traditional analyst where you have to pay us to be number one. You know, but we also like we had, you know, maybe too many CTAs on our free profile. And all of a sudden we're seeing, yeah, people value clicks, which might be our analogy to scans.
Yep. Show it now, right?
Now we're like, hey, clicks are now part of our basic paid edition if you want custom CTAs. And, you know, we used to give some of those away for free, but we're seeing, oh, people really value that. And frankly, we were giving away free value they weren't even recognizing. So we do see that, you know, and, you know, but I think our pitch is also, hey, while you're getting that short term, right, obviously you also build your long-term brand, you know, so we like to say we're giving people both. But I think you're right. There's a lot of short-term pressure. Like I need ROI now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there is no long-term.
It's tough though, because you as a marketer, you got to deliver the goods for 2024 too. It's a harder job than ever, CMO, I say, right? I think it's a harder job than ever.
I'll have less, right? Less budget.
Yeah.
And now give higher quality pipeline that converts now.
Okay. Well, Goddard, this was great. I was going to ask you what's the coolest thing on your roadmap, but I think it's Monty. I think Monty that is going to evolve further and further, and a way to get the best out of 100,000 apps is probably the most exciting thing at G2 today for the next 12 months. Do I have that right?
You do have it right. And Monty advises software buyers. The other thing I'll say, we're also building a Monty for sellers. Theory being, can we, you know, if you have a listing on G2, can we convert it for you to a deal by training Monty to also kind of answer all your sales FAQs? So we're also experimenting with that. So I'm excited. You know,
that would change the game.
Yeah. We're excited about and my co-founder Tim, he's now leading our labs team. My two co-founders are working on Monty because we're like, this is the most important thing. You know, both for the software buyer and then if we can software seller, right? But if we can automatically start having software transactions happen, that would be, you know, breakthrough.
Monty's your SDR, BDR, or Monty's your AE in that scenario?
Ideally both.
Yeah, I guess so.
Monty, and we're using it. We're trying it for our own G2 marketing solutions, but it's always amazing whenever you train an AI, you know, bot. It's amazing how quickly they learn. You know, of course, it's very easy now to get them to like 90%.
Yeah.
Getting them to 100% is a different thing, but it's, I think it's very promising.
Well, it's interesting. We should break what I've learned on the e-commerce side of things, which B2C is, even B2B to C is usually ahead of B2B, right? Everything's automation, right? And the best platforms are automating 40% of consumer interactions, right? In e-commerce. And so maybe that can happen on B2B. Maybe 40% of sales do not require a broken process, and the world's best AI can do it for you, right? They can negotiate the price, give you your answers, not lie to you, no churn and burn, no games, honest about the competition.
Zero cost of sale.
Yeah, and I'm excited. Okay, I'm excited about all the Monty. We're going to check in again about 6 months on Monty. Goddard, thank you for all the great time. This is super fun.
Thank you, Jason. Look forward to seeing you at SaaStr soon.
See you then.
Okay, see you, Jason.